Let's turn our attention to where we were last week. What is going on with Amy Griffin? On its face, this is a billionaireess woman, a life story stealer, an appropriator, a sociopath. Maybe she is everything that she says she is. She's definitely feeling herself right now. I have it in good authority that some of the people that, support her privately, they don't do it publicly, nobody does these days, are saying that she is going to defend herself and that she's got a good case. And in that case, I admire her for her patience. She's laying low. And that's got to be very, very difficult when you want to scream out, but the legal process is ongoing. Here's the thing. If Amy Griffin cannot prove herself, if she is an appropriator of somebody else's childhood violent sexual assault experiences, it's unforgivable. I mean, but I can't, somewhere the wires got crossed. I cannot for the life of me think that this woman is that psycho and that big a narcissist and sociopath. I can't. It's impossible. But boy, these recovered memories of hers, thanks to MDMA, and whether they're her memories or not, they were recovered, they were taken in, they were integrated, and they are the fuel for the new and amazing Amy. Listen to her talking about what this has done for her.
Vulnerability. And if you want to talk about parenting, the change in my relationship with my children be able to say, look how vulnerable, like things will happen in your life. And when you put yourself out there and you're honest about it and you're vulnerable about it, there's far more power than anything you could ever imagine. And so, I mean,
power,
the resilience too, going back to the resilience, I can now say that through vulnerability, I have been very resilient.
Okay. Through vulnerability, resilience, power, reclaim your power. She is really on her soapbox. And if it is basically all because of somebody else's terrible childhood experiences, you see, that's where you've got to see this the way. I mean, there's just no way that somebody can be that evil and that sick. I don't get it. Not when you're that connected in that, with that much to lose. Let's position ourselves here. The legal timeline is this. It all begins March 4th, 2026, this past spring, March 4th. Jolene Altom, under Jane Doe, sues Amy Griffin and the ghostwriter that she used for her book, Sam Lansky, and Penguin Random House. The claims are that Amy Griffin specifically appropriated Jolene's traumatic life story, that this character, Claudia, that she wrote about in her book was, in fact, her. She accuses her of invasion of privacy for the intentional infliction of emotional distress and the negligent infliction of emotional distress, meaning she cites this 2019 get-together between the two ladies at a coffee shop in Palm Springs as like a premeditated setting her up. And then 3 years later, Jolene says a talent manager contacted her and wanted all the details of her story. Now, Amy responds with an ex parte motion to compel, right, expedited discovery. She says, basically, let me see your cards when that lawsuit hits her. So, and she does this on June 15th, but it's just one of two actions she takes in response. Amy files an anti-SLAPP motion against Jolene Altom, seeking to throw out her claims entirely against her. Amy argues that the tell is protected speech, that Jolene lacks admissible evidence, that Jolene's allegations rely primarily on speculation drawn from similarities between the book and her own experiences. Right. So it would be like consequential. It's just like a coincidental thing. I don't think so. Amy, in this effort, cites her conversation with the investigating sergeant back in Amarillo, Texas, where she and Jolene and I guess this other Claudia went to school, and they grew up where all this terrible sexual violence occurred. This police sergeant, Gordon Eatley, Amy says, look, I talked to him and he found me to be very credible. And then this man is on record saying she was very credible in everything she told me. Of course, she never mentioned that there was MDMA involved in recovering memories. She never mentioned certain specifics like actual details of the violent assaults. So Amy demanded dismissal of Jolene Altom's lawsuit. Penguin, the publishing company, also filed a similar motion to throw out claims against them, saying, hey, we don't have a duty to investigate claims made by someone. Book publishers are not investigators, so we shouldn't have looked into the author. Amy, this is Amy's story. We trust Amy and all of our authors that they are recounting the memories that they say they are. Listen, these people just want to sell books. They don't give a shit. And they figure Amy has got big lawyers and she can defend all this stuff if she needs to. And she's also got big celebrities who are friends. And they will, and they're going to help promote this book. So shit, I mean, we're doing this book no matter what. So Amy does that. She fights to throw out Jolene's lawsuit. Then in the same breath, on the same day, she files her own lawsuit on offense against Jolene. And she does this with a federal lawsuit in Nevada alleging defamation. And she says every material allegation made by Jolene is false. The Palm Springs coffee in 2019 never happened. She says there are no photos, there's no text, there's no emails, there's no receipts or any evidence that proves this. She says the talent agent, Dominic Price, he submitted a sworn declaration saying he never interviewed Jolene. I don't know what you're talking about. I never groomed her. I never interviewed her. There's got to be a phone record on that. Amy says she'd already documented her own memories, or her own recovered memories of her assault before Jolene claims that Amy learned about her story. So, you know, if you're telling your story to Dominic in 2022, or he's asking you questions about it, I recovered my memories in 2020. So why would he need your story? Well, he's writing the book. Amy says that Claudia is a real person, but different than Jolene. Amy says that she and Sam Lansky, the ghostwriter for her book, met with the real Claudia in April of 2023. Now, Sam Lansky, he feels like a critical character here, right? She's saying, not only did I meet with the real Claudia, but I did it with my ghostwriters. And this guy's been dead silent. But we did find an old interview of his from COVID, way back when. And since he's writing Amy's story, listen to this is him talking about a different book of his, but what he says is very creepy.
Before I wrote this story, which is really a story about, you know, the ways in which we tell ourselves stories as people as we move through the world, the more I realized that every time we kind of open our mouths to tell us stories about who we think we are, it's a little bit of a work of fiction, I think. And I really wanted to dig into and explore that idea of how just by virtue of telling a story about something, we kind of end up making things up.
Look at the face of the woman doing the interview. Every time we tell ourselves a story about ourselves, we kind of make things up. Is this a foreshadowing of what he is doing with Amy Griffin? That's sort of interesting to me. Okay, so on June 29th, Jolene files her opposition to Amy's anti-SLAPP in California, right? Amy wants to throw it out. Jolene says not so fast, and she includes evidentiary declarations from herself and about 7 or 8 other people, friends, acquaintances, corroborators from back in the day, from the time of the incident all the way to her current life, some very powerful ones. The purpose is to persuade the judge not to dismiss Jolene's original lawsuit. And the looming date for all of this is July 23rd. On July 23rd, the judge will decide if this thing is going forward or if Amy gets her way and it gets thrown out. Now, separately, on July 6th, in the federal case, which is in Nevada, Jolene responds to Amy's defamation suit there against her, but there's no hearing to that. So she's engaged in it. Again, one's on there. Each of them are on offense and each of them are on defense. This reminds you of Karen Reed, doesn't it? Like it's a scorched earth. And it's so interesting. Both of them can't be right. Right? Is there a middle ground? Is there a middle off ramp? Is it either A, B? Is there a possible C, which is like, I somehow recovered memories that felt true to me, and I'm going to still maintain that they just happen to have coincidentally, the exact same details involving belt buckles hitting bathroom floors and sunlight coming in and frilly dresses over the head while being assaulted from behind, bandanas tied around the wrist while being forced into acts that are specifically detailed. I mean, it would be something. It would be, wow. Basically, it would not be possible. So somewhere somebody's going down, and we're going to be watching this whole thing. What's interesting to me is Amy did not file a lawsuit against the New York Times. I think about Baldoni and all of this, right? Like, not only did he go and file a defamation suit against Blake Lively and say, hold up, woman, this is all a bunch of bullshit. I'm filing a lawsuit against you. He filed one against the New York Times for colluding with her or propagating this bullshit. And, you know, it was powerful. You could really feel his innocence in the way he responded. But Amy's not filing a lawsuit against the New York Times. And her lawyer, Thomas Clare, very powerful guy from Clare Locke, big law firm, said in a statement that the New York Times manufactured a false narrative about his client. They engineered the premise for this absurd lawsuit, right? They were duped by a fabulist, he said, referring, of course, to Jolene, a fabulist with no proof or corroboration. Well, they responded to that with 7 or 8 testimonials to the contrary. He said, after 2 New York Times reporters instigated this whole situation by bringing the book to her attention, Jolene made her own choice to publicize her narrative to a global audience by acting as the principal source for and being photographed by the New York Times for this article. For its part, the Times took full advantage publicizing this inaccurate narrative, despite receiving many red flag warnings. We look forward to exposing these meritless claims in court, as well as the deeply flawed New York Times reporting that is at the center of it. Now, she was a New York Times bestselling author for 5 weeks. They were right up her butt when the book was all the rage. They were happy to ride that wave of popularity and, you know, it girl moment until, unfortunately, they ran into a woman who says she stole my life story. And then they interviewed her, and then they followed the steps and found that it was full of merit. A New York Times spokeswoman told the Associated Press, "We're confident in the accuracy of our reporting." Boom, we're not going away. So Amy's lawyer, Thomas Clare, had previously said, he shamed the New York Times too. Still not suing them, but now shaming them, saying the mere sending of a list of questions to us for fact-checking purposes when you're writing this for Amy to answer, I mean, it has, quote, caused additional trauma and extreme physical and emotional harm to a survivor of sexual assault. That's Amy, by the way, they're talking about. And that is inexcusable, he said. He said they did this knowingly and must be held accountable. Okay, Tom, if they must be held accountable, let's see your lawsuit against the New York Times. There's only one way to hold them accountable. Anyway, it is really interesting what's happening here. And now, the last time we talked about Amy last week, I shared with you several of the declarations, the testimonials by these people that Jolene went. Again, Amy doesn't have anyone corroborating her story. She was abused, assaulted for 4 years, from 12 to 16, and as the wealthiest kid in the class. And it happened on school grounds. And there's no one to corroborate the story. There's no, her family didn't know, and nothing. And Jolene, on the other hand, has 7 or 8 testimonials from people who she told the story to, who were either there and saw something, but she's got at least a trail. And there are some new ones here that we didn't get to last week. A new declaration from a woman named Shauna Bondus, who was a fellow kind of protective mother. They became friends in around 2010, 2013. Jolene was friends with her in Morongo Valley, California. They worked at a camp together. They were on a local PTA board together. And they're both parents to kids the same age. They went to a karaoke night at a place called Willie Boys. It was family night. And this woman, Shauna Bondus, recalls Jolene being very protective of the kids as they went in and out of the bathroom. And when she mentioned it to her, like, whoa, why are you hovering so much over the kids? Jolene mentioned that when she was younger, she was assaulted and in a bathroom. And then she shared that story. They were, protective parents together. They didn't do sleepovers with people they didn't know. She just talks about what kind of mother Jolene was because of her own circumstances. And she specifically recalls Jolene telling her that she had been, quote, raped by an authority figure at a school dance. So she's on record. And remember, penalty of perjury here. And this is 7 to 10 years before Amy's 2020 MDMA recovered experience. Then there's another declaration, a woman named Shelly Ann Krajnak. She's a third witness that basically independently corroborates the movie deal story that a producer had called, the talent manager had called and tried to, tell Jolene, we can turn your life story into a movie. And it was at the same night as this karaoke night. Anyway, Shelly Ann says she's been friends with Jolene since 2018. She says, I can specifically recall a night in 2021 or 2022 when I was physically present with Jolene, her boyfriend Jose, and another friend named Joanne. We had all met at a place called the Old Tavern in Vegas for karaoke night. During that meeting, Jane Doe, Jolene, explicitly told us all that someone was purportedly working in the entertainment industry at the time in Hollywood and contacted her about making a movie about her life story. So, okay, a second corroboration there of that. And then there's a woman, Dana Bullard, who's a recreational therapist at the Presbyterian Children's Home, the foster home in Amarillo, where Jolene was living when she was going to school with Amy. She indicated that she recalls Jolene and the boy, William Bryan Jennings, attending a dance together. And she recalls that Tanya Vandenbosch, another person who gave a testimonial, was living at the house as well. And Tanya's the person that Jolene's was cleaning the dress with her after that night when it was soiled from the teacher, that this woman helped clean the dress. And so she's corroborated. Look, this is crazy, but in the end, there's a lot more that Jolene is bringing to the table as far as evidence and corroboration is going, right? So in the end, the onus is really on Amy Griffin here to step up and provide some type of corroboration of her story. Remember, there's the Kroll investigation. Amy doubted her own, or at least wanted to prove, could I be making all of this up? She hired one of the best corporate security firms in the entire world, Kroll Associates. It's funny, the guy that runs it now, I know him well. I grew up with him. His father is the legendary Jules Kroll, who started Kroll Associates. I mean, they're doing investigations in corporate security and espionage cases down in like all over Colombia and Peru. And I mean, they're working in South America. They're all over the world. These people are serious. So she hires Kroll and Associates, and located within what's called the Notice of Errata filed by Jolene's lawyers, it says this: Amy Griffin also stated in her memoir that she's not sure as to whether those memories were real, accurate, or if they happened to someone else, or they may have happened to Claudia rather than herself. Also, even though Amy made significant efforts, which admittedly included hiring private investigators from Kroll and Associates to interview classmates in Amarillo, there's no independent corroborating evidence that establishes the rapes described in the tell that they actually occurred to Amy Griffin. In Griffin's own words, quote, "I was also preoccupied by doubt. I had no way to confirm what I'd remembered. There was no smoking gun, no physical evidence, no tangible proof. There had been no witnesses." Jesus, from 12 to 16 years old on the campus, on school property. It's amazing. But by contrast, Jolene offers multiple witnesses corroborating core features of her account. The borrowed dress, William Bryan Jennings, the boy's presence at the dance with her, and her disclosure to him that sexual things had happened to her. He says that. He corroborates it even now. And then you have Tanya Vanderbosch, an older kid living in the house at the time too when they were kids, saying, "I was asked to help remove a stain from the dress that she really wanted to get out." And then you have this woman, Shelton, and her identification of Jolene as the only person who matches this Claudia character. And don't forget the big one, LaRonda Barnett, her testimony that Jolene disclosed the bathroom assault play-by-play years before the tell was ever published to her.